first of all, we want to acknowledge that this is an open meeting of our regional school committee, our joint school committee meeting, which includes the Dover School Committee, Sherborn School Committee, and the Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee. It is being conducted remotely with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. So in order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 virus, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's office suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. For this meeting, the Joint School Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom as posted in the website online for the Dover-Sherborn Regional School. Please note that this meeting is also being recorded and that some attendees who are participating by remote video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that you should take care not to screen share your computer if you have anything that is open that could be broadcast or captured by the recording. So now we're going to have some ground rules. As we have in public comment, sometimes we're all trying to talk over each other. If there's something that we've said before, we're just going to try to move it along as expeditiously as possible. It would probably be easier if we were muted at first and you were acknowledged. If you wanted to speak, you can use the participants icon at the bottom, and in that icon you can raise your hand, or there are other items you can do. There's also the little emojis for reactions, where if you did like the hand, I will acknowledge that as a raised hand, or you can just physically raise your hand, just that way so not everybody's talking over each other. So for any response, if you would just wait to be acknowledged, and that way we can get through this hopefully in a very orderly fashion. As for public comment, anyone who is on who wants to speak is a public comment session. After you have made an indication that you wish to speak, please wait and you'll be acknowledged, and then state your name and also your address. As far as the agenda goes, we're going to go in order as to what was posted. I will list it by order that's on the agenda, and so I'll call on each person as we go through, and if we have missed anything or if there's something else that you need to add, again, if you'll just raise your hand, and we'll continue in this fashion and try to do this as quickly and as expeditiously as possible. So with that being said, we're going to first start with community comments. So if there's anyone on at the moment who has a community comment, a public comment, if you would like to be acknowledged, please do so. Okay, that being acknowledged, there are no community comments. Now we're going to move to the superintendent update, which is number 3 on our agenda. And so Dr. Keogh.
Thank you, Angie. So it's good to see you guys, albeit in little squares on my computer. This is strange to say the least, but you know, I've been thinking about trying to kind of recap what we've been through. But if you just think back about a month and a half, if that, we were just so concerned about our kids going on this exchange trip to China. And think about what's happened since then. Just 2.5 weeks ago, we opted to close the school. That day, the governor came out and said, no need to close the schools. So we looked kind of silly, but then 2 days later, he looked kind of silly because he closed the schools for 2 weeks. And we got guidance from the commissioner to kind of don't advance the learning, just provide enrichment learning experiences for the kids. Then we learned that some places were actually moving the curriculum forward through online learning. And then the guidance came through that the governor was actually going to close us until early May. And then we got the guidance to change our learning to more rigorous kind of advancing the curriculum learning. And so we've been down quite the path when you think about it in 2 short weeks, 2.5 weeks. And, you know, I mentioned it in my letter, and I think all of us probably know this feeling, but I mentioned in my letter home to the families last week that I do feel isolated and inefficient. And those are the terms that kind of come to mind when I think about how this feels for people. I've heard from many, many parents, you know, concerned about the remote learning, both when we were in the early stages of it and even today. You know, some saying it's fantastic and some saying, I don't know what to do. I've got 4 kids and I'm throwing my hands up. They're in different grade levels. We've really, as a system, I think, done incredibly well. We have faced down a number of challenges, including what to do when families only have 2 computers in the house and 6 people living there. So we have been handing out Chromebooks as loaners, and thank goodness we were able to do that because people have really, really needed them. But I will say I really feel like we're starting to hit our groove. I feel much more comfortable. I know that you've probably seen it, but just in case we post this video, I did want to share with the folks at home kind of what the stuff that Beth put together, really, and it was Beth. This web page that we now have, that kind of, can everyone see that? It really, really captures what we're trying to accomplish. And I can't thank Beth enough for this, whether it's just the general COVID-19 information or my letters that have gone home. And I have to tell you, that's a lot of letters in a short period of time. You know that. I generally don't like to write that much, but there's been no choice. And now I feel like it's probably going to have to be more than likely a weekly thing. As we get through this, people need to know what's happening and what we're thinking on the school side. But this has just been such an amazing accomplishment by Beth and really all of our administrators in that we were able to figure out what it is we could provide our students without overwhelming them. So we can't replicate what goes on in the classroom. That's just not happening. There's no way to do it. And those of you who are Zooming a lot, and that's probably most of us, no, it's actually really tiring. And I don't know I don't know what it is about the experience, but it drains you. So we have set it up in such a way, and this again was Beth working with the principals primarily, but with tons of feedback from teachers about how much time is the right amount of time. I don't know if you, Beth, are you willing to talk about kind of what that's looked like as you've played this out and figured out the correct amounts of time at the elementary, middle, and high school levels? Do you mind sharing a little bit of that? I think she needs to be unmuted.
You're on mute.
She's unmute. She is unmuted.
She is?
Yeah.
Oh,
Go to
okay.
your dots and unmute.
We can't hear you, Beth. That's okay. Yeah, you're unmuted. It should be working. Something wrong with your mic, maybe. No problem. If you come back, we'll know it. But basically, remember that we're not all equipped with the same technology skill set, and some of our teachers were not fully prepared for this. I mean, just imagine taking the whole thing online. It's a huge, huge undertaking. And it's been exhausting. And I am concerned about our kids and the toll that it's taking on them, and our parents and the toll that it's taking on them. But as I said in my letter, there are many good things that are happening as a result of this too. So that's where we are. I know we're going to talk about April vacation a little bit later. That's Dawn's going to talk a little bit about the kind of the business angle of getting through this phase. And, we're just, like everyone else, kind of taking it a day at a time.
All right, so with that being said, we'll move on to our finance update. Dawn?
Yeah, so I provided for you in the updated packet this morning 2 really important on the desktop directives or guidance that we've received, and that sort of sets the stage for me just updating you on what expenditures are we still experiencing as we're operating remotely. And so I was going to walk through just quickly each of our employment groups and let you know how we're handling them, and then talk about some of the bigger expenditures like transportation and out of district and where we stand with those. So obviously our educators and our educational assistants are still being fully paid and are fully engaged in remote learning. And we're also rolling out a package of online learning for a subset of our educational assistants. So we have both those groups actively working and completing their sort of employment requirements for us. On the admin assist, we have them answering emails, retrieving phone messages. Some of them are assigned special projects, and obviously they're available to assist as needed. As you know, we had some open hours in all the buildings last week, and the admin assist actually helped with those scheduled times. So they're continuing to be fully paid, and we're being creative in coming up with things for them to do. The custodians are a little bit more difficult, but we're still keeping all of our custodians on at full pay and working around some of the state's guidelines that have been issued as far as what's essential services. So that's another group that we're being creative with, but we are protecting all of them with full pay right now. Just so you know, we've gotten word that any of our employees that are on grants, those are still, they're recognizing those as being expenditures within the school year. So there is no issue with continuing to use grants for primarily our educational assistants. So that was good news. And any long-term sub that was covering for a teacher on a leave, they're also still covering those classrooms. So they're still on payroll in addition. What we're not doing is any of the before our school, not the DITA Shita, but the METCO programs, any tutoring, that is not being continued during this closure. For revolving funds, so those are the employee groups that are covered under your general fund, so the budgets that you see, and grants. So as you know, we also have revolving funds, and the 2 groups in there are food service. So our food service is continuing to be covered at their full base pay, but at their base hours. So it's really the stripped down hours that they work on a normal basis, and it's really just those employees who work year round. So not the substitutes, not the fill-ins. It's really just our skeleton crew. And Janelle has them doing a PD module every day. Desi has a great make it your own sort of website for PD throughout the year, and they're continuing to throw things up there for them. We also have our food safety company has just opened up some online courses, knowing that there's a lot of people that are looking to do some PD, and all of this is free, and everyone's required to do the PD, record it, and send it to Janelle what they've done. So we are keeping them as busy as we can. Our last group of employees is through your community ed funds, and that's our extended day. And much like food service, we're continuing to cover the base crew at their base hours. They've been given PD assignments, they're doing lesson plans, and they're doing some Zoom weekly planning meetings, just so that when they're ready to come back, they're going to come back and they're going to be fully ready to go. And of course, we're still paying all of our 12-month employees who are very hard at work and doing remote support for our teachers and staff that are currently taking care of all of our students. The next set of expenditures, I just want to touch base on transportation. So if you notice in the second on the desktop, it talks about contracted services, and it specifically mentions that there are services that they want us to continue to compensate so that we can make sure that when we come back to school, all those services are still intact and are there for us. And so we are looking at transportation really at a statewide level. We've had about 3 statewide calls with all the business officials. And what they've done is they put us all together by our bus company, and we're negotiating as a group. So really what we're trying to come up with is, we want to keep you in business because we want you here when we come back to school, but we don't want to pay for things that you potentially don't need. And so all the different groups in the state are currently working with their bus contractor to figure out what we need to pay to allow for continuity of service. Once we decide on that, I will bring forward to the school committees, hopefully at your April 28th meeting, an amendment to the current contract, because that's what they're sort of asking us to do, is to amend the current contract for this particular situation that we're in right now.
So Judy, to answer your question, Judy has a question, Dawn.
Yes, sorry, Judy.
Oh, that's okay. My question was, the bus companies, I assume, are all small businesses that can apply for the payroll protection program, which you know, should cover a huge amount of their expenses. Or is
yes, so that is one of the factors. Yep. So not all of them are small in the state. There's some larger bus companies. So Conley, though, is probably one of those. So the two people who are negotiating for Conley are talking to them about their plans for doing that, because obviously we don't want to pay them and then have them also get the loan that's going to be forgiven and they have a cash windfall. So all of that is being taken into consideration during these negotiations to see what direction they're going in and sort of how each district wants to handle it. Now, for the regional school district, it has been made clear that anything that we pay for transportation will be count on your end of the year report as eligible for reimbursement. So there are no concerns about having an expenditure with a planned revenue stream that we're not going to be able to match. So that is one sort of safeguard they have told the regions. So that was good news. And then the same goes with out-of-district transportation. We use Accept, and so as a collaborative, we've been talking to them. We probably will see a fuel credit for the fuel not used, but of course, we want to keep our drivers intact, because you know how difficult it has been for us to get our drivers at Accept, and we want to make sure they maintain their vehicles. So they're working out what kind of discount we can get, and then as a group, we'll decide how the districts want to deal with that credit. Either take it this year or roll it against our expenses next year. So that's the benefit of a collaborative. We sort of have some input onto how that's going to work. So the last category is out-of-district tuition. And of course, those are schools that we want to continue to see to serve our students. So we're looking at those all in different ways, depending on if they, one, are providing remote learning to our students. We have Kate's staff is looking into that. So we have not paid any bills at this point past March 9th or March 11th. And we're waiting to see how this all shakes out. We have some residential programs that have closed. So obviously we wouldn't want to have to pay a residential rate when the school's not open. So that's going to be more of a school by school based discussion. And it's still even a much larger discussion at the state. There's still a lot of uncertainty of actually how to go about this to keep that structure in place, but not to pay for something you're not getting.
Okay.
So that tells you where we are. I will say it's a constantly changing environment. I'm probably on a conference call every other day about one of these topics, and it's just very fluid, and we'll keep you updated as things transpire.
So does anybody have any questions for Dawn or Mark?
Hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for that rundown. I'm sure it's like a whole new set of problems to figure out that we've never really had to address before.
Exactly.
I heard one small detail about the Metco tutoring not being covered in the program. And I was wondering if
it was the before and after school, where they watch them before and after school, we're not covering those hours.
Oh, okay. So it's not Metco.
Yeah.
I thought it was tutoring, but it's.
Well, and then there is some tutoring. That's like Title I tutoring that we do before or after school. That's not necessarily Metco related.
Oh, okay. I must have mixed things. Thank you.
Right.
So is that it for everybody on the finance? Because we'll come back around to Dawn, because we are going to have to look at our transportation contract that we're going to do, the next transportation contract. So Dawn will be back on shortly.
Andrew has a question. Andrew, you know.
Dr. Keogh.
Just one quick comment. I can't emphasize enough how this is all moving in incredibly strange and fast pace. And sometimes slow pace. I mean, the state had to make determinations, for example, about MCAS, but it had to go through the legislature because the commissioner couldn't just make that decision. A lot of these things have to go through the legislature, and that's what's kind of gumming up the works because people don't know what answers to give school systems. So it's a really, like Dawn said, it's a really tricky thing to navigate, and we'll just do the best we can to keep you guys up to date on what we learn when we learn it. That's it.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the educator's contract. And for that, I'm going to call on Mr. Spalding. Henry?
Right. So what I want to quickly do, at this point, everyone's seen the updated MOA in terms of what's been added, negotiated to be added, and negotiated to be removed. So what I want to do is go through a high-level presentation so that you guys can take a look at sort of where we came to be from a high-level standpoint. Obviously, there's an opportunity for any questions or comments afterwards, and then we will vote to move forward with the agreement afterwards. But I also want to, there's two new faces on our Zoom. We have George Morrill, who's the representative for Sherborn from the Sherborn Select Board. He was involved with the negotiations, and he will be voting with the Sherborn School Committee as a representative when we vote to ratify or not ratify the agreement. And then Robin Hunter, who is from the Dover Selectmen. Robin, this isn't her first rodeo. Robin's been through this a few times, and we greatly appreciate everything that she's done in her guidance. Obviously, a lot of the words that Angie said to kick off the meeting came from Robin. So Robin is going to vote with the Dover School Committee as well as with the Regional School Committee. So Robin gets to vote twice. We swap every other negotiation between Dover and Sherborn. So the Sherborn representative, Mark Bragdon, voted with the Regional School Committee 3 years ago. So everyone say hi to Robin and Mark, please wave. All right, so hopefully, oh wait, let me share my screen and take you here. And I am going to assume, hey, Dr. Keogh, give me a thumbs up if you can see it, because I see your picture. All right, I assume everyone else does. All right, great. So, I'm not going to be able to see if you have any questions or comments at this point. So let me just run through it, and then we'll be able to go back, because right now I only am looking at my my presentation. So as we entered into negotiation, there were a few sort of guiding principles that we wanted to keep in mind as we met with the educators and the DSEA. The first one was to be fair and equitable for the increases amongst our educators. We obviously want to be able to compensate our teachers for the hard work they do, but also be competitive because it's obviously a recruiting tool as we look for future teachers. We want to remain competitive with our agreed upon comps. Just as a reminder, we had 9 comp districts that we agreed upon with the union. They happen to be school systems that are nearby. They happen to be very highly paid school districts, but also high performing. So that's sort of who we recruit against, how we benchmark against. Boston.com or Boston Magazine looks at as well. But that's who we were competitive with for our comp districts. It's not just in finances, it's also with language within the agreement, et cetera. We obviously want to maintain our programs and services. We would hate to have to remove something that is valuable to either our teachers or our students or even the buildings itself based on a contract. We do receive guidance from Dover and Sherborn, and we want to make sure we are keep that in mind. We obviously have parents that have children in the school system that get the benefit of that, but we also have a lot of citizens that used to take advantage of the Dover school systems, and their kids have moved on. Some people live in a town that have never even taken advantage of the school system. So we got to make sure we keep track of all of our constituents. And then obviously we want to make sure any language that might be outdated is brought up to speed with any federal or state legislation. I'll go to the financial summary first. It seems to be one that tends to get the most eyeballs to it. So this was Article 7. It's a matrix. If you remember through some of our discussions, how educators are paid is based on their level of education, their years of service, continuing education, and as they move along, they go either down steps or over lanes. But within that, there is an overall increase year over year that would get negotiated, that would get layered on top of these steps and lanes idea. So what you'll see is what has been agreed upon, at least in principle, between the union and the negotiating team, is a fiscal year 21, which actually begins September 1st of 2020, I believe, increase of about 1.925%. And that's made up of a 1.75% COLA increase. And then what was a little unique is we are adding a fixed dollar amount to all the cells on the matrix. And in year one, that fixed dollar amount is $175. We did figure out what that means as a percentage. And on average, because obviously an increase to the younger, lower paid educators, that percentage is greater than if they're sort of on the bottom step, which means they're the ones that are getting paid the most. It does have an impact on the percentage. But on average, if it was at $1,000 increase, that would be 1%. So the $175 represents 0.175%. That's where we get to about a 1.925% COLA increase, if you want to call it that, for year one. Year two, it's about 2.2%. And year three, which is fiscal year 23, it's about 2.225%, which gives us a 3-year increase, which is another benchmark people look at, of 6.35% over 3 years. I'll tell you that is anywhere from 0.65 to over 1% from 3 years ago, based on where they were on the matrix. So that's where we are this year, or this time around. Another financial element is the longevity payment. Obviously, for years of service, teachers are rewarded with a longevity payment. And this was something that came up 3 years ago that didn't make it all the way to the negotiating table, but it did come back up again this time. And we looked where we were with the comp districts, obviously negotiated a little bit on the numbers. So you'll see the increases within those categories. 15 to 19 years of service went from 400 to 800. Next category went from 500 to 1200. And for 25 years plus of service, it went from 1,000 to 1,700. And then one other item to note is we decoupled the retirement incentive payment from the longevity payment. So what would happen is if an educator notified us by the required date that they were going to retire, there was a payment that they would receive. But if there was a longevity payment in there, it would still be the same number. So in a sense, they wouldn't get the benefit of the longevity payment plus the retirement notice payment. So that's been decoupled, so they get both. And we've also changed the notification date from October 1st to November 1st. A little bit more detail on the matrix. For fiscal year 21, which is the first year for the agreement, you'll see what the base salary was for 2020, and then what the impact is on some of these financial implications. There was a step increase that was happening no matter what. That was whether they stayed the same or moved, there's always step increases. The COLA increase, which Don has separated out as two items. It's a 1.75 COLA increase Then if you remember that $175, that's about, we rounded up to 0.18%. So you'll see those impacts, which is an overall increase for fiscal year 21 of 3.36%. Okay. We do illustrate the step increase by districts, which shows Sherborn, for example, has a fair amount of teachers that are in that what I call the lower right-hand section of the matrix, which is the more highly compensated educators. So therefore, you see the increase is a little bit less. And then if you look at fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, we use some averages and some assumptions on what the impact potentially could be. Obviously, there's retirements and other things that come into play, but that's what we're looking for the overall fiscal year 21, fiscal year 21, fiscal year 22, and fiscal year 23. And then this is the impact on longevity. Basically, it goes from about 50,000 to 100,000 for year one with longevity payments. And as a reminder, that is spread out over the three different sort of districts. So you got Dover, you got Sherborn, and then you get the region sharing in that based on obviously their population. And then you'll see also fiscal year 22 and 23 what the impact would look like. The other items that kind of came into play that ultimately got negotiated, some of them were housekeeping, cleaning up the language, making sure what was, and this is an example, not a real example, but, for example, if there's something referenced in Article 22 that needed to be cleaned up for Article 27, we, did some cleanup there. So there was some consistency that was needed. We talked about, the existing sick time. So we did a little bit of cleanup within the agreement. Article 10 was around teaching hours. What we did is we created some flexibility around the teaching hours for our educators for after-school help and the ability for them to have some flexibility there. And we felt the start time changes would, this was beneficial there. We also recognized team chairs, their summer work. So that also was added to the contract. The agency fee one, that was a request by the educators. It was something that wasn't even used anymore. It had to do with the union paying agency fees, which they don't do. So it was language that just wasn't even required. So we removed that pretty quickly. Article 24, 25, and 26 sort of lumps into leave. You guys can read this as well as I can, but a couple of the highlights are 3 days of bereavement pay from 1 day for not immediate family members. We provide more language around maternity leave in accordance with federal and state statutes. And then another item you'll see for partners of adoptive parents and mothers going from 10 days to 15 days for leave. I'll ask when I hang up, but I believe that they were also thinking that that would come out of their sick day, but I can't remember exactly. Yes. And then the final part is there's an MOA or an MOU that will be kicked off within the next 30 days, most likely via Zoom, to talk about the evaluation and professional growth that we had, if you recall, for some of us that have been around for a couple of years. We had sort of some standards, and then we adjusted it last year. It had to do with the peer observers, and there is a desire to work through what the state is requiring to make sure it fits nicely with what we think is important for evaluation. And there's going to be a team of administrators and school committee members with the union to manage through that MOU. So quickly, how do we measure up? If you remember the principles, we fall right in the middle and continue to be right in the middle of our comp districts, some of the most highly paid districts within the state, which was something that was important to us. We fit nicely within the guidance that we received from Dover and Sherborn, so that is nice alignment there. And then obviously we are comfortable with some of the language changes, making sure we're in guidelines with the state and federal statutes and any future operational district needs. So the administrators that run the district are not confined by any language that's been changed, and maybe even offered some flexibility for them. So the negotiation was an improvement from 3 years ago. We had some fun, we had some laughs, we had to obviously do some hard work, but I really want to thank the folks that were involved. And the committee made up of Kate, Lynn, Rachel, Angie, and Megan from the school committee was fantastic. Big thank you to Robin and George for taking some time. They obviously have a lot going on with their town responsibilities as well, so they were very helpful in being involved. Obviously, the DSEA and the teachers, they put in a lot of work, and this is very important to them as it is to us. So Laura McGovern was the chair. She did a great job with Rob Williamson, Lainey Glenn, Amanda Rogers, Renee Grady, Michelle Hugo, Robin Mansfield, and Anna Martinetti. So we appreciate their effort and obviously the respect that they brought to the table. And then we wouldn't have been able to do it without Joan Stein, who is our legal counsel. Joan was fantastic, and we obviously thank her for her help. Dr. Keogh, once again, was fantastic. And Don, you were great. Really appreciate everything you did. And Carl was the union representative on the legal side, and I also want to thank Carl for his time too. They were great. So that is what I have. Hopefully everyone saw it, and I wasn't just talking to myself.
Great job. Does anyone have
comments?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Questions or comments? Anybody? Oh, Kate.
Kate, I think you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
I just wanted to thank Henry again for spearheading this and leading us in a really positive and collaborative effort. He and I did it 3 years ago, along with some other people, and this, in my opinion, was a whole different ball game, and he did a great job, and I just really want to thank you again, Henry.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Amanda?
Yes, thank you, Henry, and everyone who was on the negotiation team. I just want to put in kind of a note for the next go around that I'd really like us to think about creating more equity in the parental leave policy so that adoptive parents have the same right to use sick leave for as long as a birth mother does. I think it's an area that we should be leaders in if we can. I think strong parental leave policies are good for everyone. They're good for places of employment. They're good for families. And I think that if we can do that, it might be something to think about the next go around.
And there was one part, did you get that thing I sent to you, Henry, about the one, it was just a grammar technical?
Yeah, so there's a couple of items that can get updated. Don and I, we received a couple other pieces of feedback too. So there's a couple items that can get updated from a non-substantial change, obviously grammar or maybe punctuation, that can get done before it ultimately gets signed by the chairs of the 3 school committees and by the DSEA. So we'll have time to fix that. I appreciate all the folks that paid attention to that one. We put that in there as a test.
So did I miss anybody else? Oh, Michael, Jaffe.
Oh, sorry. This is Gordon Kinder here. Warrant Committee. Sorry, are the slides, where can we get the slides? I don't actually have those in the packet.
Yeah, those will be posted online after this meeting, so they'll be available for public.
Great. Henry, if you don't mind, could you just ping me with them? Would that be a problem? I had a few questions, but you went through them a little quickly, and my audio wasn't perfect, so I didn't hear everything.
Okay, so did you ask me that we'll send you a copy? Is that what you're asking for, Gordon, or do you want me to go through anything right now?
No. If you just send me a copy, I'll shoot you the questions via email. I think there are probably things we can handle offline.
Okay.
Michael Jaffe, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. For the Dover and Sherborn town representatives, question as to whether there is any concern or revised guidance given what we're going through with the pandemic? Or is there comfort that the town resources should be able to absorb the financial changes in the contract for the next 3 years?
It's an ever evolving situation. And right now, the impact is very difficult for us to determine exactly what it's going to be. We were comfortable with the financial impact of this contract on the town of Dover. And, until we really understand better what, if any, financial impact COVID-19 will have on the town, it's really difficult to answer that question.
I feel the same way as Robin. We've talked about it in Sherborn. We've already actually set up, because we're still on semi-annual taxes this year, and May 1st is our tax due date. We're considering at our April 16th meeting whether to move that to June 1st for people or not, whether we need to borrow money in order to get to that point. Got a lot of moving pieces right now in Sherborn that we're trying to figure out to make sure in the immediate future we're okay. But long term, it fit within our guidance for 2021. So we'll see what happens going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Henry. Again, thank you.
Dr. Keogh's got a question.
Oh, thank you. Dr. Keogh?
Yes, I just wanted to, Henry, you were asking about whether that 10 to 15 days of parental leave comes from sick leave, and that is true, it does.
Thank you.
The other thing I just wanted to mention, and I know it's restating the obvious, but Henry really did an outstanding job with this. It's a tough process. It's always a tough process. He did a great job. Joan, I see you've joined us. Joan was fabulous. It was really a great team effort. And, we look at these things just as we had to in this situation in the past 2.5 weeks. We do what we have to do to maintain the excellent school system that we have, and we will make decisions as they come at us. I think the towns have hopefully learned to trust us in that way, and we'll do what we have to do to make it work without losing our system. These are scary times because they're very uncertain, but the economy could bounce back if people can get back to work. So there's so much unknown right now, but I just want to be sure that people know that we're definitely paying attention and already thinking about next year, the next budget.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Keogh. So the next item on our agenda is up for Dawn Fattori, our new transportation contract.
Wait. You gotta take some votes first.
I think we want to vote this thing before we move on.
Right. And Henry, can you explain to them? Do you want to? So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to call it by name.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I can make a motion, and then what we need to do is go through by district. So Dover, Sherborn, the region. And I believe when we vote, you need to say from, like, for example, Dover, Leslie would say Leslie Leon, and then give her vote. Rachel Spellman, give her vote. So what I'll do is I'll call on you. You say your name and you give your vote. And then Robin is going to vote with Dover as well as with the region. So don't forget that. And then we go through that by each committee, is the way I understand it. Dr. Keogh, you're raising your hand, or are you saying hi to somebody?
Just saying hello.
All right.
Megan's son. Sorry about that.
So that's the way we need to do the roll call. You don't necessarily need to repeat my motion. You could say, take Henry's motion if that's easier. But that's kind of, I think we need to do it.
Okay, Henry, you start with Dover, and then we'll move to Sherborn and then the region.
So the motion, I believe, should say something like, and Joan can keep me honest, actually, now that she's on the phone. Do I have a motion to accept the updated, let me see, do I have a motion to this is what I wanted to say. Just a minute. Yeah. Do I have a motion to approve the updated teachers negotiation? I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to approve the updated educators agreement between the Dover School Committee, Sherborn School Committee, Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee, and the Dover-Sherborn Education Association for fiscal year 2021, 2022, and 2023, starting September 1st, 2020, running through October 31st, 2023.
August. Yeah, August 31st.
August 31st, 2023. Thank you. So whoever says so moved, please say your name and who you are and what you're doing.
Brooke Matteries, so moved. Is that it?
Do I have a second?
She said it.
Mark, say your name.
Oh, Mark Healy. I second it.
All right, thank you. Why don't we just do the whole thing from Dover? Do I have any discussion in Dover? Hearing none. Leslie, please state your name and your vote.
Leslie Leon, I vote to pass it, to approve it.
Thank you. Rachel Spellman. You're on mute.
Hi.
Hi.
Rachel Spellman, yes.
Thank you. Brooke.
Brooke Matteries, approved.
Mark.
Mark Healy, approve.
Henry Spalding, yes. And Robin.
Robin Hunter, approved.
Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, so now for Sherborn to approve and adopt the same motion as stated by Henry Spalding with regards to the teacher contracts. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Amanda Brown, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second, Megan Page.
Okay, so is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's poll for a vote. Amanda Brown,
Yes.
and state your name.
Amanda Brown. Yes.
Megan Page,
Megan Page, yes.
Nancy Cordell,
Nancy Cordell, yes.
Mike Fitzgerald,
Mike Fitzgerald, yes.
and George Morrell,
George Morrell, yes.
and Angie Johnson, yes.
Okay, let's do the region. Can I ask everyone from the region just to get off mute just while we vote? It'll be easier, it'll be a little quicker. Same motion. Do I hear a motion?
Michael Jaffe, so moved.
Can I get a second, please?
Judy Miller, second.
Do I hear, any discussion?
No.
All right, then let's go for a roll call. Lynn Collins.
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy Miller.
Judy Miller, yes.
Maggie Sharon.
Maggie Sharon, yes.
Michael Jaffe.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate Potter.
Potter, yes.
Ann Hovey says yes, and Robin Hunter again.
Robin Hunter says yes.
Thank you.
Just quickly, that's me clapping, not raising my hand. Thank you very much, everybody. This is obviously a very important thing for us to do. It happens every 3 years, and it's one of the key things that happens with school committee, and you've all taken a lot of time to read through the information you've been provided. And I know the teachers, which by the way ratified this last week at a 98% approval, feel the same way. So again, appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, so now it's on to Dawn.
Now I can go. Okay, so more numbers for you. In your packet was a summary of our transportation bid that I tried to do as many bullet points as possible to keep it easy on the eyes. So I gave you a summary of our bidding activity. We had 11 vendors request our bid specs, but we had one vendor, Conley Bus, submit a bid. I have, as we normally do, we receive a 5-year contract, but the first 3 years is what we accept now, and the additional 2 years are an optional extension. If you remember last year, we did pick up the last 2 years, so you wouldn't pick up 24 and 25 until we enter fiscal year 23. So what you're looking at tonight really are just the combined annual cost of the first 3 years. So we bid this sort of as a K-12 district, but then each contract is separately written for each of the school districts. So we're looking at it in totality, but then I broke it out for you so that you could see the financial impact of each one of your districts. All in all, we're looking at an overall 5-year increase of 25.9%, with the first year increase being the majority of that at 20%. That falls in line with the typical cycle you see out there, which if you look at our fiscal year 11, fiscal year 15 increase of 25%, the first year increase in that contract was 18%. The contract between fiscal year 16 and 20 was actually more of a steady increase over those 5 years, so it was a little bit different phenomenon, and that was 13.7%. And I lay that out there just to put it in context for you as to what we're seeing this year. Our fiscal year 20 daily bus rate, just to give you some perspective, is $320 right now. And if you look at the comparable districts that I mentioned to you for fiscal year 21, you see that 320 is actually really low. So part of what we're seeing in this contract is a wage adjustment because the wages were increasing faster than they predicted when we had our last 5-year contract. So you are seeing a little bit of that catch up in that arena, which brings us up to the daily bus rate of 384. I then broke it out by district for you so that you could see what each of your fiscal years will be under the contract. I also highlighted some other contract terms. So there is a fuel adjustment clause, and in the contract, so we have a 10% over under window, and that price as of February 12th, when this was bid, was $3.003 a gallon. So that will be the base that we use to look at the fluctuation in each year. In this 5-year contract we just finished, we saw years of everything. We saw years of paying more, we saw years of getting credits, and we saw years of doing nothing. So there is fluctuation over those 5 years when it comes to fuel. In fact, I'm anticipating if the fuel stays the same, we'll probably start seeing some credits next year, since this was locked in prior to everything that's been happening in that arena. And then this, for the region primarily, the special trip costs, which are all your athletic buses, are showing an increase of 11.6% in year 1, and then 3 and 1.4 for years 2 and 3. In addition, this contract still allows some flexibility to have one less bus at the elementary levels if we want to. That actually is a favorable pricing option for us. We continue to use all the buses, but by allowing us that flexibility gives some financial breaks to the 2 elementary districts. Any particular questions on the data presented? Michael?
Thanks, Dawn. Could you explain the under-over, the 10% under-over, how that works?
So at the first of each month, they take the AAA price point for diesel fuel, and if it fluctuates more than, if it's 10% higher or 10% lower than $3 a gallon, if it's lower, we get a price credit. And if it's over, we pay more to Conley. So it's a protection for them for increases in fuel. But it protects us too, because if it's less, we do get the credit back.
And is that rateable based on how high or low it is? So if it goes down to $2, there would be a different credit than if it went down to $2.50?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's to that rate. So once you get past that 10% mark, however many cents that is, then you get that times how many miles that we're on our contract in a month.
Thank you.
Brooke?
Don, do you, can you explain why we would have 11 potential vendors interested and then just Connolly? Is that because they're the incumbent and people then don't want to bid, or what is the thinking about that?
So a lot of times there's curiosity about your bid specs. They want to see what's going on and what you're asking for. Because some of these places that requested bids weren't even local. They were national companies. And this is a public bid, so it is posted in multiple places. And there are people who there are services that go and pull bids for clients to show them what's going on. And that's basically that activity.
Okay.
I would say there's very few districts in Massachusetts who get more than one bid.
Really? Okay. So what we see is what we get, basically.
Yes. Now, the ability when you have one bidder only, though, is that you are allowed to negotiate. So it doesn't lock you in. It does give you some ability to sit down with the vendor and talk through the contract and see if there are changes that you feel or that you want to make as the person before you accept it. So you just don't have to take what they say. You're allowed to negotiate if there's only one bidder.
Okay.
Dr. Keogh?
Yes, so, and this is a complaint that superintendents make a lot, that, maybe a bunch of vendors will put in a bid, or inquire, I should take out the papers, but only one will bid. This is a common complaint, and the state's heard about it over and over, because you wonder if you really have a free market. But as Dawn pointed out, it does allow us to negotiate, and it's allowed us to have conversations with them about, well, why these numbers, and what we learned through that process was, in fact, that Dover-Sherborn has had really, really favorable rates among the 11 towns, was it, Don, that you looked at, that he provided us numbers on?
Right, there's about 14 districts in there.
And we were right near the bottom. So we've done very well. Conley's done very well by us. But that is a common concern. That's a great question, Brooke.
Maggie?
Hi.
I do want to share on the others. Am I muted or I'm not muted? Oh, I do want to share that on the other side of that coin, before we moved to Dover, we lived in a community, a suburban community where bus contracts went out to bid. And in fact, one of these big national companies did come in and undercut the local company. And they saved some money for sure in the first round of their contract. And just like they had to go with the lowest bidder. They fired every single driver in the local community. They hired new drivers from out of the region who they paid minimum wage to. And for the next 2 years, there were outrageous problems with the quality of the bus service in that community. In fact, the out-of-state vendor who'd come in, Durham School Services, came in from Texas, and they were, in fact, not able to do the job that they had signed the contract for. So even though, on one hand, there is definitely the desire to get competition in the market, the job of transporting our kids to school every day is actually one of the #1 jobs that we have a responsibility to do, to make sure that the vendor that we select can do that safely. And I appreciate that Connolly is able to work with us and be flexible with us, and that they are a local company that does a reasonable job by their employees, and that people want to work for. Because in this environment, at least pre-COVID, that was a big issue. So thank you for all the work you've done with negotiating.
And I will say, having worked with Conley now in the seat for 3 years, there are actually an excellent group to work with. They listen to all of our needs and our concerns, and they're very transparent in their discussions with us. And I was very nervous because, this is the first one they've actually gone through a real bid, and we had the 11 vendors that potentially we would get an unknown pop in here. And with the school start time coming down the pike, that was a scary proposition, that we wouldn't have our drivers who know us and know our routes with flipping everything around. So I think that we felt really happy that Conley is going to be back with us, and we felt very comfortable with the rates that they came up with. And even more so, I will say, with all these transportation calls that I've been on, where everyone's been vocal about what their daily rates are. I mean, everyone's in the 400s that I've been talking to. So I feel this has even given me another level of comfort, I think, where our contract is. And just remember that whenever you're comparing daily bus rates, though, so much goes into that daily rate. So it's not apples to apples. Just when you go out there and you start looking at other rates, a lot of it has to do with how many miles that your buses have to travel. And that's a big component of your rate, and also how many runs your bus drivers do. So there's a lot that goes into it. So just be careful just blindly comparing rates, because it's not as transparent from that perspective. You have to dig a little deeper. But we have, and we feel very comfortable with the contract.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, we do have to vote on this again by different committees. So each committee will tailor their motion. You have a copy of it on the back of your, or attached to the transportation document. So I'll start with the Sherborn one. So if you don't have it, you can write down what I'm saying. So if I could get someone to make the motion to award the Sherborn Public School transportation contract to Michael J. Connolly and Sons for a 3-year term in the amount of $677,664 for the annual base bid and all other related established prices for the incidental bus transportation and fuel adjustment cost as submitted in the bid form. And the school committee at its discretion reserves the right to evaluate the option years at the appropriate time. Have anyone to make that motion?
Mike Fitzgerald, make the
Mike
motion.
Fitzgerald, thank you. Do I have a second? From Sherborn?
Amanda Brown, second.
Thank you. And then I'll poll the members. Megan?
Yes, so moved.
And say your name.
Megan Page.
Megan Page. And Mike Fitzgerald?
Mike Fitzgerald, approve.
And Amanda Brown?
Amanda Brown, approve.
And Angie Johnson, approved. We lost one member. She had to jump off.
I'll jump on it. I guess I'll go next. And I like your strategy of having the Dover School Committee members take themselves off mute. We can move it along quicker. Do I have a motion to award the name? Do I have a motion to award the Dover Public Schools transportation contract to Michael J. Connolly and Sons for a 3-year term in the amount of $762,371 for the annual base bid, and all other related established prices for incidental bus transportation and fuel adjustment costs as submitted in the bid form. The school committee at its discretion reserves the right to evaluate the option years at the appropriate time. Do I have a motion?
I'll move the motion.
Name, please.
Leslie Leon, I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Mark, did I hear you had something to say?
Yes, Mark Healy, I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Leslie,
Yes.
name please.
Leslie Leon, yes.
Thank you. Rachel,
Rachel Spellman, approved.
thank you. Brooke,
Brooke Matarese, approved.
thank you. Mark,
Mark Healy, approved.
great. Henry Spalding, approved.
All right, we'll go to the region. We have a motion to award the Dover-Sherborn Regional Public Schools transportation contract to Michael J. Connolly and Sons for a 3-year term in the amount of $2,561,874 for the annual base bid and all other related established prices for incidental bus transportation and the fuel adjustment cost as submitted in the bid form. The school committee at its discretion reserves the right to evaluate the option years at the appropriate time. Do I hear a motion? And can y'all take yourselves off, please? Off mute.
So moved.
So moved.
You have to say your name, please, Michael.
Michael Jaffe, so moved.
Thanks. Do I hear a second?
Lynn Collins, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go through for a vote. So Lynn,
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy,
Judy Miller, yes.
Maggie,
Maggie Sharon, yes.
Michael,
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate,
Kate Potter, yes.
and Ann Hovey, yes. Thank you, Dawn, for all your work on this. I know that it was a lot of work, more than you anticipated, for sure.
Thank you. This is very exciting.
Great
And
job.
I'll just add real quick too on the transportation. So today I actually signed the agreement to move forward with the bus routing software. And so we will be taking the current year Aspen information with all the bus people and start working on those routes so that we have an opportunity to see how it's all going to play out next year. And it'll be a much faster turnaround this summer, and hopefully we can get the routes out earlier because we will have done a lot of the hard work now. So I'm looking forward to bringing that in-house and getting that up and running.
That's great, Dawn. Thank you very much. Okay, so next on our agenda is the policy information. So Lynn Collins is going to go through that, and that was included in your packet. And so there's a kind of a bare bones bullet point if you want to refer to that. That might be easier for you because there's some things that are updates, some things that are new, and some things that are just housekeeping. So I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Collins.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Yeah, so the policy changes presented today are a first read, so there's nothing to vote on. It's just to talk about it, and then you can read the changes that are set out, as Angie said, in your materials. There is a summary and and red lines of all of the policies, so you can see the actual changes. I did actually end up doing a PowerPoint, Angie, I didn't tell you, surprise, that lays out in a little more, it lended itself more to presentation mode. So I'll try to share that now. Okay, so here it is. Okay, so the proposed changes are to a number of policies, and some of them are changes to existing policies, some are proposed adoptions of new policies, and then there are some housekeeping changes. All of these right now are sort of compliance mode type changes, so anything, they are changes that are intended to reflect changes in legislation, and then we went with, for the most part, recommendations from the MASC to our policies and updates to their own model policies. So the first one to our existing policies is some fairly extensive changes to our homeless students enrollment rights and services policy. And as you can see here, it's sort of, I summarized the significant changes. They've expanded the definition of homeless students to include unaccompanied youth. So, you know, kids that may have a home but aren't living there, having, you know, run away or whatever. So that's a logical change. They've removed youth awaiting foster care placement from the definition of homeless children, and just made them ineligible for this benefit, the benefits under this policy. It expands the liaison duties to ensure that district staff receive professional development. It clarifies that a homeless student's living arrangements is confidential information that's not for the directory, but is rather a confidential student record. It expands the transportation requirements to include those students who've become permanently housed during the year. And it streamlines the dispute resolution procedure by, instead of the policy listing everything out, it just includes a link to the Department of Education advisory that sets that out in more detail. The second policy is, and as Henry had mentioned, I'm just going to charge through this because I can't see everyone on my screen if we've got questions, so I'll take the questions afterwards. The second existing policy to include changes is the student discipline policy. That's the policy that sets out the rights and obligations of us and our students with respect to suspensions. One of the changes is to specifically outline what should be included or what needs to be included in the suspension notice. So things like, naming the offense, laying out the consequences, the right to and the logistics of a hearing, and the right to an appeal. It also makes explicit the obligation to facilitate special ed services. And it modifies language from that they shall have the opportunity to they will receive education services. So just a lot more definitive. And then a housekeeping change, it added a guardian to all the parent references. So parent/guardian. So those are the two existing policies. There are proposed new policies, 2 of them. One is the children of military families, and that policy, it sets out our responsibility under the law to facilitate the education of students who are transferring in and out of the district because of their parents' service in the military. So some details in that policy is, rules regarding the sharing of student records between the receiving school and the sending school. There are certain enrollment requirements, mainly that it be immediate, which means to waive certain things certain requirements when enrolling these students. Immunization requirements, accommodations with respect to the ability to present immunization records. The requirements, it requires streamlining the placement process, special education, testing, things like that. And it also includes a requirement to allow additional leave, additional absences for leave-related reasons. So when their parent is stationed somewhere or gets a transfer, the kids get additional leave, additional absence for those leave-related reasons. The second proposed new policy is children in foster care. That is, again, due to legislation that sets out the rights of children in foster care and the obligations of the districts to provide educational stability for children who have been placed in foster care. And some of the main provisions in this policy are the obligation to collaborate with stakeholders that's in determining whether the child should remain in the school of origin. Stakeholders mainly being, the parents and both school districts, the student, the obligation to collaborate with the DCF. I just put D there, I don't know why, but Department of Children and Families on transportation issues. The obligation to immediately enroll students, and the obligation to designate a point of contact who will collaborate with DCF on the services provided. Then we've got proposed housekeeping changes to a number of policies, non-discrimination language, proposing that we add the characteristics protected by state and federal law, meaning gender identity, pregnancy-related condition, homeless students, and to amend those policies and any other policies where this language needs to be updated. Specific policies that require updating with this language are the equal education opportunities policy, the school admissions policy, and the guidance program policy. Then additional housekeeping changes. There were a number of changes where just the legal references at the bottom or cross-references and web links have been updated, and that's in the policies that are listed here. So not substantive in any way, just, the legal references and things have changed. And then finally, there were non-substantive language changes that were made to more closely match the MASC models. The attendance areas, add that the committee will take into consideration walking conditions that are consistent with the committee's transportation rules. And then immunization of students. The policy, they've changed that to, what our policy is inoculation of students, and we're proposing updating it to immunization of students to match the MASC policy, model policy. And that's it for those changes. So any questions on anything?
Anyone? Thank you, Lynn. I just wanted to bring out that Lynn really took this on. She is the chair of our policy committee, and it is a daunting task, and she does a fantastic job of making sure that we're following the guidelines and all the right language, and it's like one overlay over the other. I don't know how she does it. I feel like she has one of those, you know, back in the day we had those things that overlay on the overhead and you could mark through. I don't know how she does it, but you get it and you see where she's changed the language and how it reads, and it's a fantastic job. So I know that was a lot of work, so thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Okay, so that's our first read. If you have any questions that come up, just send it to the chair of your committee and we can pass it on to Lynn. Otherwise, we'll do the second read next time around and then we can vote. So now we're going to do...
Angie, wait, sorry, I thought I raised my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Just really quickly, also, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. Just a little bit of overview for folks that some of the things you might be like, why are we worrying about this? Some policies clearly impact our schools and some don't seem to. As Lynn referenced, that there's a lot of things that we just need to do for compliance reasons that may or may not ever come into play. But that's what our policy, the overarching policy, needs to cover for our districts. So just as sort of an overview.
And Maggie?
I did want to add a huge thank you to Lynn. Your careful analysis of each of these policies took hours and hours, I know, and I very much appreciate the work that you did on our behalf to review them. I also do think that while many of these policies seem not to apply to us, for example, homeless children or the children in foster care situation, they don't not apply to us until they do. And I think that making sure that we have sound policy in place that complies with the federal law and with the recommendations of our governing bodies is important to do, because in that crisis, in that situation, people ask, they don't know what to do, and being able to have something to rely on that keeps us in line with what is not only the right thing to do, but also is the correct thing to do is really important. And we're missing some of those things in our policies. And I also very much appreciate your review to bring elements of gender equity and to bring the language in line with what is currently appropriate and recommended language. So thank you. I very much appreciate your work.
Thank you, Maggie. That was well said. Anybody else? I see no hands. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the school calendar. I'm going to let Dr. Keogh speak to this because we've been looking for some guidance at the state. And so Dr. Keogh has some guidance.
Thank you, Angie. Yes, so you may recall, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, the tail end of the week, I wrote to the families saying that we'll be moving towards this new stage of remote learning. And in that email, I mentioned that we would more than likely be sticking with the April vacation. And first and foremost, I want to apologize for that because that's not my decision. I took the liberty of putting that out there. I shouldn't have, because that's a school committee decision. All of that said, I've had the chance to talk with the chairs about our vacation or our, our planned vacation. And they asked obvious questions like, what are other area school systems doing? And so I did some research into that, and at the same time we were expecting to get some some direction from the Commissioner of Education. And the reason this matters is because in the past, the Commissioner of Education has said, you can't just do remote learning and not have to make up your snow days. That was his position. So we're all saying to ourselves, then we can't just cancel April vacation unless he's going to say to us that if we're doing our existing remote learning, that it will count. Because we couldn't cancel vacation and then make the teachers work that week and then also have them work at the tail end if they're not going to count. So he did say that they would count. So that was important guidance from us. I included that in the packet, and I also included what it would look like if we were to forego April vacation. The end date would now move to June 17th. And the districts around us, although not universally, most districts around us do seem to be interested in foregoing the April vacation because, let's face it, everyone is stuck at home. Nobody's going anywhere. And frankly, I think the families are saying, if my kids don't have the schoolwork to do, what am I going to do with them? And I mean, you really can't even tell them to go out and play down at the ball field. So also in my conversations with teachers, there seems to be strong support for not universal, but definitely a majority feel that we should in fact forego the April vacation. So that is my recommendation, but of course it is your decision.
Is there any discussion? Any questions? Anne?
I'd just like to say that I think that right now also what's the most important from my perspective is what's best for our students. And I feel like right now what's best for them is the continuity that we've just started to establish. Sorry, my cat's meowing in the background. So I think that from my perspective, that's really the real reason to be doing this is the continuity. They're just started to get a rhythm going, and I think that that's really important to sort of establish a sense of normalcy, the new normal right now for our students. And working, and this disruption that April vacation right now would cause would be more detrimental.
Anybody else? Any questions? Oh, Amanda? You're on mute.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I was thinking that way as a teacher and a parent at first. But what I've come to see in my own family and heard from other parents who are juggling this sort of homeschooling and working thing is that there isn't any continuity. Like the continuity has been lost. And everyone seems to need a break. It's a lot to have sort of the demands of, 5 people Zoom calls to schedule in a day, the external expectations, which look very different from a classroom and are really overwhelming for kids. And I feel like there's so much other stuff kids are trying to process right now that in terms of their mental health and the health and well-being of families, people need a break to just pause and breathe. I think if we were going back to school on May 4th and we knew that, it would be one thing to keep going, but we could be needing to sustain what we're doing through mid to late June. And that feels really hard without a break that families can just sort of pause and be together and process what's happening in the world. So I'd advocate for keeping the break.
Judy?
I have a question. It's just so I understand it, Andrew. They will still get Patriots Day off Monday or not?
Yes, so we would still have Patriots Day off, and we have Good Friday this weekend. So there are 2 long weekends in there, and there is one more obvious long weekend in late May.
Anyone else? Oh, Leslie?
Yeah, I would actually like to advocate for not having the break. I have a lot of friends with young kids, and I guess we all feel like we want some continuity and being given some guidance from the teachers during that time. And none of us can go anywhere anyway. So I guess I would like to advocate for just ignoring the break and continuing on. That's it.
And I think the thing too, Dr. Keogh, like he said, we will end earlier on the 17th, because if we kept the break, Dr. Keogh, we would then push it back out to what, the 23rd of June would be our end date.
That's right. And, you know, none of us have a crystal ball. I mean, Dawn's been making an excellent point in our conversations on the side, that if we knew we were coming back, we might want those days actually, because we don't think of these remote learning days as 100% of what they get when they're in school. It's probably closer to like somewhere between 30 and 50. I hate to say that, but that's what I think is the reality. And so if that's the case, we would take those full days in a heartbeat. We just don't know, and we don't feel confident that we'll be back and be able to have that in school time. And even still, in school time in June, I don't care how happy the kids are to see each other. Late June is a tough time to keep the kids focused.
Yeah. So I have Maggie and then Henry. So Maggie, go ahead. Oh, and then Megan. Maggie? You're muted, Maggie. Unmute. There we go.
I guess to your point, Dr. Keogh, I do think that we always want our number one choice is time in school with kids, obviously. I do think, though, that in all matters, whether it's the remote learning that we have going on right now, or whether we're able to come back to school in person with people at some point, I think that we all have to recognize that all of this is not an educational crisis. This is a health crisis for which we are trying so hard to provide education to children and families when many of them are in a state of trauma. And so our imagining, our idea that we'll be able to bring them back to school in June and everything will be okay and we can get maximum learning out of everybody is simply not likely to happen that way, because kids are going to return back and they're going to need, many children will need, attention to grief and to help process what's been probably for most of them the most traumatic situation that will happen in their life. There is no doubt in the next 2 weeks that many of our families, many of our employees, many of us ourselves are going to suffer loss. And we won't have any of the normal things that we have to deal with loss. And yet we are still pressing on and providing education and support and opportunity to children. And while I do think that there is definitely a benefit in a break, I can say, speaking from my own family, whether or not my kids have school to distract themselves, there's no way for us to get a break from what we are living in right now. And I'm happy that there is something for my kid to do that isn't a video game that keeps them busy for a few hours a day. So I really appreciate all the faculty and staff and all the folks who have been putting work together. I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it.
Henry?
Yeah, those are all great comments. Thank you, everybody. The one thing that I think about is we're trying to make a decision with the information we sort of have at the moment, which is what the administration has been doing with the school district from day one, and we've all been doing in our personal and professional lives since day one as well. So thinking about it that way, thinking about the momentum that we've just gained, I keep reminding the chairs when we meet twice a week, we're now on day 11 of remote learning. Day 5 felt very different. Actually, maybe it's day 12 because it's Tuesday. Anyways, it was, the feedback that we got the first week was very different than where we are now because of all the hard work that's been put forth by the administration and all of the educators. And people have mentioned momentum, so I'm not going to harp on that, but that is an important thing to think about with the decision that, or with the information we have now, and sort of we got our sea legs underneath us. So I think it's important to try to keep the learning momentum going and just keep in mind the information we have in front of us when we make a decision.
Megan, did you want to comment? And then Judy.
Yep, I do. Thank you. So Maggie, I agree with, I appreciate everybody's comments. And Maggie, I agree with what you said about it being, having the kids having something to do. And I've talked to friends of mine in other towns, and I think what our teachers and administration have been able to put together for these kids is phenomenal. And I feel like they're really having a much, while it is a very challenging situation, they're having a much better experience than a lot of other kids who are not really getting anything from their schools yet. And we just are kind of getting going on this and getting our momentum going. And I think it's beneficial for the kids and to keep that going. And I actually kind of just casually pulled my kids to ask them. I said, we're supposed to have April vacation and, week after next, what do you guys think about that? And they're like, well, what are we going to do? We can't go anywhere, and I think their feeling was, or they definitely said their feeling was they'd rather, have the time in the summer when maybe we could go out and go to the beach or do something versus having time now because we're just going to do more of what we're doing every day. So that was kind of their feeling. And I thought it was interesting to hear the kids' perspective on it too.
Thank you, Megan. Judy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Maggie, I really loved what you had to say. This is an incredible situation, and the people who are on the front lines are the educators and Dr. Keogh. And I think that this is a situation where we're respecting what they think from an educator's point of view is important. And if they think that continuity is important, then I would agree with that. And that's all.
Okay, so with that being, Brooke's down there. Go ahead, Brooke.
Am I on? Yes. So thank you, everyone. I don't want to reiterate what we've already said, that I too believe that we've just getting started in our sea legs under us, and I've seen a great change in the last week and a half, and the teachers have been phenomenal. But to Amanda's point, if there are, I would advocate for skipping April break, but I want to be very sensitive to parents who are feeling overwhelmed and in need of those kind of support. So I know you have said, and guidance has said, and we've sent out, many, if you need help, so I just want to make sure maybe in the language, if this does occur, that we skip vacation, that we can really be very clear to parents who need the support, or, they don't have to get every assignment done or every, just to make sure that we're really being sensitive to a parent who has several children at home and is working, and I'm not saying how we do that necessarily. That's something that Kate, you could look at, or but just to make sure that we are being sensitive if we do continue over the break, to continually help parents who are feeling that this is just overwhelming. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. And I'm great.
Kendra, can I?
Oh, wait, Mike. Who is it? Gordon. Gordon, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm the Warren Committee liaison, but I'm not speaking as a Warren Committee member, more as a parent. I would concur with what Maggie and several other folks reiterated. Honestly, at this point, I think that as a parent, I would prefer they continue to have, I'll call it the distraction, which is a terrible thing, a terrible way to describe education. But it's a chance to get together with their friends, even if virtually, to see them. We're practicing pretty extensive social distancing here. I hope everyone else is. And it's a social interaction. It's fun for them. They have their teachers there who are people that they know and love. And personally, I wouldn't be against it. I would also add that, and I'm not trying to step on any toes here, so I want to be very careful, Dr. Keogh and everyone else who knows a heck of a lot more about this than me. But, kids lose a substantial amount of their progress over the course of the summer. A week probably isn't going to do that. But, depending on how long this goes, I wouldn't even be opposed to, trying to make up days during the summer and extending the school year. that's me as a parent, not as a warrant committee member who is concerned about costs and expenses. What can I say? It all comes down to the dollars. But at the end of the day, I think schools are, incredibly important. They're an incredibly important social interaction, and I think we should recognize the fact that, at this time, which is very challenging on a number of fronts, any ground we can, I won't even say make up, but avoid losing seems like a worthwhile endeavor to me, personally, as a parent. Thank you.
Mike Fitzgerald.
No, I was just going to say, I've got sisters, both the teachers and both their school systems are considering it. They haven't made a decision as of yet whether they're going to cancel April and just, cut the year short in June. One thing that was brought up was that they thought of maybe, whether their school committees, when they rejoin in May, that maybe they would think about maybe they throw an additional day in for a long weekend, another long weekend or something, as they had mentioned, so that it wouldn't be 4 days that we would cut out. Maybe it would be 3 days that we would cut out, and you'd think about another extended long weekend. So you've got Memorial Day, maybe you throw something else in there, but that's not something that has to be decided tonight. I'm just throwing it out there. That was an idea that was brought up. If we're canceling April, that just at least maybe throw another long one so people can just feel like they've refreshed for the kids and themselves.
Okay. Dr. Keogh?
Yes. So I agree with Mike, and actually we talked about that at one time. Originally, I said to Dawn or Beth, why don't we just move April vacation to May or late May when we know more, and maybe we'll need it then. You guys always have, as the 3 school committees, always have that prerogative to add a day to the end of the year and move one on to, for example, Memorial Day weekend. And so I agree with you, Mike, that that's something that could be considered down the road. The other thing that I want to emphasize while I have this opportunity, because I don't know who said it, but somebody mentioned that, for some people this is overwhelming. It is overwhelming. It's overwhelming for all of us. How could it not be? This is unheard of. And for parents to not have their typical routines where the kids go to school, and now many of them are working from home with their kids and trying to teach their kids, and you throw onto that the anxiety of the financial situation and the anxiety of potentially being impacted by this in our families with loved ones, it's a lot. And I think it's really important, while I have this opportunity, assuming that some people watch this tape, that to take advantage of this opportunity to tell people, just the reason we did the no credit, no credit, or pass-fail model was in fact to tell people that we're not expecting perfection during this time. And I just think that's really important. So I don't know who mentioned it, but I appreciate that. You made a good point. All of you did. So it's not my call ultimately. I'm giving you my recommendation, and we will do whatever it is you think is best.
So with that being said, if we were to follow a recommendation and to not have the April break and to finish earlier in June, we would have to make a motion to do that and to adjust the school calendar. That's what we do as school committee members. So with that being said, and we've had all this discussion, do I hear a motion as such that we would forego our April break at this point? And again, like Dr. Keogh said, we could revisit it, and then we could end the school year on June 17th.
Angie, do you want me to make the motion?
I would like that, Ann Hovey.
Okay. Can I hear a motion to have the last day of school be June 17th and not observe April vacation for this school year 1920? So we also do it by the region. Okay. So Maggie, can I get a second, please?
Second.
Say your name, please.
She's
Take
muted.
yourself off mute.
Yeah, Judy Miller, second.
Okay, keep yourselves off mute, Region. Any more discussion? All right, we'll vote. Lynn,
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy,
Judy Miller, yes.
Maggie,
Maggie Sharon, yes.
Michael,
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate,
Kate Potter, yes.
and Ann Hovey, yes. Thank you.
Henry, do you want to go next?
Maggie, why don't you go first? My computer froze up, so I just want to hear your motion. So you go, and I'll copy you.
So I'm going to copy the same motion as the region. That the motion is to forego the April vacation for this 2020 school year and to end the school calendar on June the 17th, 2020. Do I hear a motion from the Sherborn School Committee?
Mike Fitzgerald, motion.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Megan? will you
Yeah,
state?
Megan Page, second.
Very good. Okay, any discussion? Okay, Sherburne, take yourself off of mute and I'll do a roll call. Mike Fitzgerald,
Mike Fitzgerald, approve.
Megan Page,
Megan Page, yes.
Amanda Brown,
Amanda Brown, no.
and Angie Johnson, yes. And Nancy is off.
Okay, great, thank you. Dover, you can take yourself off mute. Do I have a motion similar to the same motion that Angie just presented to the Sherborn School Committee?
I'll move the motion.
Name, please.
Leslie Leon, I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a
Seconded.
second?
Mark Healy, I second that.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Leslie, name, please.
Leslie Leon, approved.
Thank you. Rachel.
Rachel Spellman, approved.
Brooke.
Brooke Matarese, approved.
Mark.
Mark Healy, approved.
And Henry Spalding, approved. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, thank you all. So now we're going to move on to this tech collaborative agreement. And that was in your packet. Dr. Keogh, do you want to discuss what this means to everybody in case anybody's unfamiliar with the tech?
Sure. So, so Medway has expressed interest in becoming part of tech. Because we are a collaborative, there isn't just one body that makes that decision. It's actually each school committee has to vote to accept Medway to the collaborative. And, you know, in terms of advantages, it's shared costs. So we spread the costs further around. And the rest is really in the details, but it's not something that's received any kind of pushback from the executive board. This is something that everyone was in support of, but as a formality, we do need to support it in order for it to go forward.
Just for clarification, do you want to explain to them all what the tech board does or what it is? Just
so
for
the tech collaborative is the group of towns that we're part of that provides educational services for special needs students at all different levels, alternative programs, more complex needs. It's situated over in, I think it's technically Walpole now. Mm-hmm. They run a good organization where I'm on the board of directors for all of you. We're also members of ACCEPT. So ACCEPT Collaborative is who we use for our special education transportation. Tech is a great organization. I really like it, and I know Armin Pyers, the superintendent of Medway, and is really interested in just being part of this, and I think it's a good thing.
Can I just add that they're also big into cooperative bargaining, cooperative purchasing. Yes. All of our tech bids for office supplies and for Dover, that's where your oil bid comes out of, is all organized through tech. And they also do all the food bids for all of our food service departments. So that's a bigger arm that tech does for us versus ACCEPT is purely special education. But tech is a huge cost saver for us to participate with them and to be able to have access to those purchasing agreements.
And there is strength in numbers.
Yes.
So this is Gordon, Warrant Committee. Takio and Don, so I noticed a bunch of towns in this. Would there be any impact on costs? It sounds from what you're saying, Don, like they're mostly positive, but would there be any impacts we should be aware of or be letting people know about?
No, I mean, if anything, it just helps spread the overhead at tech across more districts. It gives them, for any district that is a member, you actually have a member discount for other programs versus a non-member district. So there's huge benefits. But once you join too, there's liabilities, because once you come into an organization, then you are also then taking on their OPEB. So that, you really weigh highly entering. So I'm sure Medway has looked at this very long and hard before jumping in, because it is a big decision to enter into a collaborative based on what you're going to assume by being a member. But it only makes tech a stronger organization to have more districts members.
And the fact that Dover-Sherborn is actually in both Accept and Tech is kind of unusual. We get to take advantage of both. So I support the recommendation to include Medway.
So, Dr. Keogh, we simply need to make a motion to accept Medway into the, because I saw that there were language proposals after each, because they had several different items, but we just have to vote as a body to say yes to accept them into the Medway, to accept Medway into Tech.
Yes.
Okay. So we need to do that by district as well.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll start with Sherborn, and you can make sure, Dr. Keogh, that I'm phrasing this motion correctly, okay?
Okay, let me just get to that page. So
do I need to do it with each language?
You actually want to approve the amendment. So you want to approve the language change.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not looking at that page, Angie. Hang on for 1 second.
I've got each of those pages.
Yeah.
Right, you have to approve all of those.
That's what I was wondering. That's what I.
Yeah, and you can just say as proposed.
As proposed, exactly.
So I can just say as proposed the changes to, because it was language proposal changes on page 4, 5, and 6.
And 25.
And 25, yes.
Yes. So the proposed changes to the Tech Collaborative Agreement, pages 4, 5, 6, and 25.
Okay. All right.
We don't actually need to do that specifically. We can just do the proposed changes as presented.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's fine. Perfect.
Okay. So Sherborn, do I hear a motion to accept the tech proposed changes as presented?
Amanda Brown, so moved.
Second.
Mike Fitzgerald, second.
Okay, any discussion? Then we'll go ahead and take off mute and we'll go ahead and call for a vote. Megan?
Megan Page, yes.
Amanda?
Amanda Brown, yes.
And Mike?
Mike Fitzgerald, yes.
Angie Johnson, yes.
Do region. Do I hear a motion from the region? Y'all take yourselves off mute.
So moved. Maggie Sharon, so moved.
Get a second, please.
Michael Jaffe, second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
This is Gordon.
Excuse me. Sorry, excuse me, Gordon. Sorry, this is Ann Hovey from the region. Right now, we're taking a region vote. It's about it's the region that's discussing. Sorry that was not clear. Any discussion from the region?
No.
All right, thank you. So we'll go, Lynn. We'll vote. Lynn.
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy.
Judy Miller, yes.
It's Maggie.
Maggie Sharon, yes.
Michael.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate.
Kate Potter, yes.
And Ann Hovey, yes.
Great. Do I have a motion from Dover?
Mark Healy, so moved.
Thank you, Mark. Second?
Leslie Leon, second.
Great. And then we'll do a roll call. Leslie,
Leslie Leon approved.
Rachel,
Rachel Spellman approved.
Brooke,
Brooke Matarese approved.
Mark.
Mark Healy approved.
Great, thank you. And Henry Spalding approved.
Okay, so finally, I think we're moving on now to the end of the agenda. We have the consent agenda for the minutes of January 14th and January 22nd, which seems like a really long time ago. So we need to vote on these, don't we? As they are. I read through, I did not see anything that was incorrect or any errors. Did anyone else? No. Okay. So with that being said, I think I'm going to do a vote from Sherborn on each, but can I do them together? I can do them together, can't I?
Or do the consent agenda.
Yeah, we can do them together.
Just
All right.
approve the consent
So-
agenda.
Of the 14th and the 22nd. So Sherborn, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda meeting minutes of January 14th and January 20th of 2020? Mike Fitzgerald moved. Second?
Megan Page, second.
Any discussion? Okay, let's poll a vote. Amanda?
Amanda Brown, yes.
Megan?
Megan Page, yes.
Mike?
Mike Fitzgerald, yes.
And Angie Johnson, yes.
All right, I can do the region. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Lynn Collins, so moved.
So Lynn moved. Can I get a second?
Miller, second.
All right. Discussion. No? All right. Lynn.
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy.
Judy Miller, yes.
Maggie.
Maggie Sharon, yes.
Michael.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate.
Kate Potter, yes.
And Ann Hovey, yes.
Thank you. Do I have a motion from Dover?
Rachel Spellman, so moved.
Thank you. Second.
Leslie
Second.
Leon, second.
Leslie Leon beat you there, Mark. Leslie Leon second.
She always does.
It's like Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Do I have any discussion? Okay. Leslie.
Leslie Leon approved.
Thank you. Rachel.
Rachel Spellman approved.
Brooke.
Brooke Matarese approved.
Mark.
Mark Healy approved.
Great. And Henry Spalding approved. Thank you.
That wraps it up. So thank you all for a very
Wait, just quick. Looks like Michael's got something to say, but also, I don't know if you picked up on the beginning of the meeting. We're moving the next joint school committee meeting back to April 28th, I believe. We had originally moved it to May 5th to accommodate Sherborn's town meeting, which obviously is being also rescheduled. So the next joint school committee meeting is going back to the original date of April 28th, correct?
Is it the 28th? Or, yes.
28th.
April 28th.
Yep, April 28th.
No.
And we were going to have probably a regional first, then a joint, then a Dover.
Correct.
We can get all that information later.
Yep.
There's a few timely things that need to just get taken care of, but well, there'll be plenty of time to get that information out to you guys.
Yeah. Can I just really quickly, I just want to say a huge, huge thank you right now, since we have Andrew and Beth and Kate with us right now. Thank you to you and your teams. This has been an extraordinarily challenging time. And I feel that we as a district and we as school committee members have been really, really fortunate to have a team that's really coalesced and really done some amazing work. I'd like to really, really thank the teachers who have, from all accounts, just gone above and beyond and been amazing. I wanted to make sure that Jill Fedora gets mentioned too, because I know that she's done a huge amount of work, kind of an unsung hero. And also Laura McGovern for her work with the teachers, kind of as a liaison between the administration and the teachers. This has been really just an amazing opportunity to see how well this community works together and cares for each other and about each other. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Hold a second. Michael's got something to say, Angie.
Michael.
Yeah, and if you prefer not to, Kate or Angie, not to take the question, that's fine. But I'd love to hear just really briefly how things are going with special ed services while we're remote.
Well, it's definitely been a journey. And I think that I've been in talks in many different department groups and many different meetings. And I will say that I feel lucky to be in this community, to have such supportive staff, families, and just community members. So I think it's definitely not going to be exactly everything that can take place while we're within the school, because how could it be? But I think what's been really, nice to see is just people wanting the connections and wanting to figure things out and be really creative. So we're in constant contact with each of the related service provider folks, with every single department at all the 4 buildings. The counseling group met yesterday. So it's just trying to talk with people about some of the barriers that are happening on a regular basis, because they want to give students everything possible, and just trying to figure out what's feasible. And I've been trying to communicate out what that looks like. I think the harder part is that special education is individual. So there is not going to be one way that everyone gets academic support, or one way that everyone gets, anything. So I think that's been, the good part has been that people have really been creative and really individualized in the way that they're trying to support students. So in my purview, it's not a smooth sailing, but it's been, a very collaborative and creative process thus far, but that we keep checking in on. Things are ever evolving. There are lots of things we're still waiting for word on. We have a weekly call with Dees, and they give us some updates. So it's ever evolving, but I think this is my first year in this position, but this has been, very, it's just endearing to see how everyone's really rising up to support students and families.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? All right. Well, then I say we have a motion to adjourn, and thank you all for this very experimental first time Zoom joint school committee meeting. Thank you, everyone.